I still remember the sound of his voice that evening, flat, calm, almost rehearsed. He didn't shout. He didn't pace. He just looked at me across the dinner table and said, "I can't do this anymore. She's pregnant." For a second, I thought I hadn't heard him right. The words didn't make sense. She who? Pregnant how? We'd just come home from work, both still in scrubs, the smell of antiseptic clinging to us. The kind of ordinary evening that used to mean peace after long hospital shifts. But that night, peace wasn't invited. I remember my hands trembling as I set down the glass I was holding. I didn't ask questions, maybe because deep down I already knew the answers. I had felt it for months. The distance, the late shifts, the way he'd stop meeting my eyes when I asked if something was wrong. Now the truth stood right in front of me, wearing the face of the man I thought I'd grow old with. He didn't even apologize. He just sat there, elbows on the table, as if confessing a mild inconvenience. I wanted to scream, to ask why her, after everything we'd shared, but no words came out. Only silence, thick and heavy, wrapping around us like fog. When I finally spoke, my voice didn't sound like mine. "And what happens now?" He sighed, eyes darting away. "I'll file for divorce. She's keeping the baby. It's the right thing to do." The right thing. Those words hit me harder than the confession itself. Apparently, leaving me for someone else's pregnancy was the right thing. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just stood up, walked into the bedroom, and began folding my clothes. Every sound, the click of the hangers, the rustle of fabric, felt louder than thunder. He didn't stop me. And maybe that was my real answer. The silence that said more than any explanation ever could. When I called his mother to tell her I was leaving, she didn't console me. She lashed out instead. "You couldn't even give me grandchildren. What did you expect? He's a man." Her voice cracked with anger, but all I heard was venom. I hung up mid-sentence. I couldn't let her poison be the last thing I heard that night. I left the house with one suitcase and the last of my dignity. The city lights blurred through my tears as I drove through the dark, heading toward my hometown, toward the place I hadn't called home in years. It was a long drive, 10 hours of silence broken only by the hum of tires and the whisper of memories. Every mile felt like shedding another piece of the life I'd built with him. When I finally pulled into my mother's driveway, it was dawn. She opened the door before I even knocked, her face still lined with sleep and worry. She didn't ask questions. She just hugged me. For the first time in months, I let myself cry. Later that morning, as I lay in my old bed, the one with faded lilac sheets and a creaking frame, everything felt both painfully familiar and foreign. The smell of my childhood home, the quiet ticking of the hallway clock, the distant sound of my brother's children laughing downstairs. It should have been comforting, but I just felt empty. I thought about my husband, ex-husband, I guess, and the life we had planned. The nights spent studying side by side in medical school, the dreams of building something together, the promise that we'd be each other's home no matter where life took us. All of it gone in one evening, replaced by a stranger's name and a pregnancy that wasn't mine. But even in that hollow ache, something small began to stir, something that felt almost like peace. Because deep down I knew this. I couldn't fix a man who didn't want to be faithful. I couldn't fight for a marriage that was already over in his mind. That night, as I looked at the ceiling of my childhood room, I told myself a simple truth. This pain will pass. And when it does, I'll never beg for love again. I didn't know then that this ending would be the beginning of everything. Because sometimes, losing a life you thought you wanted is the only way to find the one you truly deserve. After the shock began to fade, I found myself lying awake at night, thinking not about him, but about me. How did I become the kind of woman who endures everything in silence, who never complains, who keeps smiling even as her world falls apart? And then I remembered. I had been trained to survive long before my marriage ever crumbled. I was 14 when my father died. One day, he was there, strong, steady, the kind of man who filled a room just by being in it. And the next, he was gone. A sudden heart attack, no warning, no goodbye. That was the first time I saw my mother break. Not with tears, but in the way she looked at our future. We went from comfort to struggle overnight. Before, money had never been an issue. After, it became the quiet monster that followed us everywhere. There were 3 of us, my brother, my sister, and me. My brother was 18 then, my sister 16. Both of them were still in school. My mother worked at the hospital day and night, taking double shifts to make ends meet. She'd come home with tired eyes and the faint smell of disinfectant clinging to her clothes. She was a doctor, and in our town, doctors were respected. But respect doesn't pay the bills. I still remember watching her count the money at the end of each month, whispering numbers under her breath, deciding what could wait and what couldn't. I wanted to help. I wanted to fix things. But all I could do was study harder because she used to say, "Your knowledge is something no one can take away from you, not even fate." So that's what I did. I studied, worked, and dreamed of becoming like her, strong, capable, unshakable. My brother married young, during his second year of college. Everyone said he was too young, but he was stubborn. He loved her. Soon they had a daughter. And somehow, even with everything she was already carrying, my mother began supporting them too. I never once heard her complain. She said family doesn't ask why, only how. My sister left home soon after graduation, chasing her own dreams. That left me, the quiet one, the dependable one. The one who never caused trouble. By the time I graduated from high school, I knew exactly what I wanted, to become a doctor like my parents. I wanted to heal others the way my mother healed us every day, without even realizing it. Medical school wasn't easy. Those were years of exhaustion, sleepless nights, and endless books. But they were also years of purpose. I felt close to my father again whenever I wore the white coat. It was like carrying a piece of him with me. That's also when I met him, the man who would later become my husband. He was charming, clever, always the first to volunteer during rounds. He'd joke that he fell for me because I took better notes than anyone else. I thought he was the kind of man who'd stand by me forever. When we graduated, both of us were offered internships far from home. I hesitated. My mother was getting older, and I didn't want to leave her. But she insisted. "Go," she said. "Live your life. Don't build your dreams around mine." So I went. And for a while it was beautiful. We rented a small apartment near the hospital. We had little, but it was ours, a tiny home filled with laughter, books, and the quiet joy of being together. His parents lived nearby. His father was a kind man, always gentle, always respectful. But his mother, she was different. At first, she pretended to like me. She'd bring over food, ask about my work, and compliment my cooking even when it wasn't good. But I started noticing how often she'd call him, always at dinner time, always with some urgent favor. When his father passed away, her need for attention grew stronger. She would ask him to fix light bulbs, drive her to the store, repair the faucet, anything to keep him close. And he would go every single time. I didn't complain, but I could feel the distance between us growing with every favor. We talked about having children. We both wanted them desperately. But months turned into years, and every test brought the same heartbreak. I began to feel defective, broken. Even though no doctor ever said it, I saw the silent judgment in their eyes. "You're the problem." I buried myself in work, delivering other people's babies while silently mourning the ones I might never have. He became distant, distracted. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and realize he wasn't beside me. He'd say he was working late, covering for someone. I believed him, because believing otherwise meant facing a truth I wasn't ready for. Now, lying here years later, I can see it all so clearly. The red flags were there: his mother's control, his quiet resentment, his growing indifference. But love makes you blind. Or maybe it makes you hopeful, and hope can be cruel. I was raised to be strong, to endure, to keep going no matter what. But I was never taught that it's okay to stop, that sometimes walking away isn't failure, it's freedom. That night, as I stared at the ceiling of my old room, I realized something. My strength didn't come from the life I built with him. It came from surviving every storm before him, and it would carry me through this one too. Looking back, I think betrayal rarely begins with passion. It begins with small, quiet things: missed dinners, cold shoulders, a phone turned face down. That's how it started with him. Slowly, almost tenderly, as if he was teaching me how to live without him before he was gone. At first, I told myself it was just work. We were both doctors. I was a neonatologist, he was a traumatologist. We worked different shifts, different departments, different worlds under the same roof. He often came home late, sometimes after midnight, claiming an emergency surgery or a complicated case. I believed him. Of course I did. Because love and trust aren't opposites, they're twins. You can't have one without the other. But then came the distance. The silence over breakfast. The way he'd scroll through his phone instead of asking how my day was. The subtle irritation when I spoke too long about work or when I laughed too loud. It was like living beside a ghost of the man I married. I tried to fix it. I planned small getaways, cooked his favorite meals, even took up jogging because he'd mentioned once that he missed active mornings. He never joined me. He'd say, maybe next week. Next week never came. When we finally decided to see a fertility specialist, I thought it would bring us closer. It didn't. The endless tests, the hormones, the monthly hope followed by disappointment, it all became too heavy. He stopped coming to appointments. I went alone, pretending not to notice the pitying glances from the nurses who knew I was married to one of their own. I remember one particular night, a stormy Thursday in late autumn. The rain was pounding against the windows, and I'd been waiting for him since 6. His dinner had gone cold. By 10, I'd convinced myself he was just caught at the hospital. By midnight, I'd stopped convincing myself of anything. When I finally heard his car outside, I felt both relief and dread. He came in smelling of perfume that wasn't mine, faint, floral, something expensive. I didn't say a word. He kissed my forehead absent-mindedly and went straight to the shower. I sat there, listening to the water run, wondering if he could hear my heart breaking through the sound of it. The next morning, I found a message on his phone. A name I knew too well, a nurse from his department. Short. Casual. Can't stop thinking about last night. My hands went numb. The world didn't collapse dramatically. It just dimmed. I didn't confront him right away. Maybe because I wanted to believe it was nothing. Maybe because I wasn't ready to accept that the man I built my life with was building a new one without me. Days passed. Weeks. He grew colder, but I grew quieter, a silence born of exhaustion, not fear. I watched him drift further away, like a ship leaving harbor while I stood on the shore, clutching memories that no longer mattered. Then came the day he finally spoke the truth. He came home early, sat at the same kitchen table where we'd shared 1,000 meals, and said the words that would end our marriage. She's pregnant. I remember his expression. Not guilt, not even regret. Just a strange, calm resolve, as if he were reading a medical diagnosis that had nothing to do with his own life. For a moment, I thought of every sacrifice I'd made, the years of waiting, of hoping, of trying to become the perfect wife. But perfection doesn't save you from betrayal. It just makes the fall quieter. When he left for work that evening, I stood in the middle of our apartment, surrounded by everything we'd built, the photos, the furniture, the books. All of it suddenly felt meaningless. I looked around and thought, this isn't my home anymore. So, I did what my mother would have done. I acted. No scenes, no yelling, no broken dishes. Just action. I folded my clothes, packed my things, and left before dawn. That drive back home, 10 hours through darkness and rain, became a line in my life, before and after. Before, I was someone who believed that love could fix anything. After, I was someone who finally understood that love without respect is just slow destruction. When I arrived, my mother welcomed me without questions. My brother's wife made tea. My niece hugged me like I'd never been gone. I sat there, surrounded by the soft noise of family, and realized how long it had been since I'd felt that kind of warmth. But even peace can feel unfamiliar after too much pain. For weeks, I moved through my days on autopilot, working at the hospital, helping newborns take their first breath, smiling at mothers who didn't know I cried in the car before every shift. Healing others became easier than healing myself. And yet, every time I held a baby, I felt something gentle flicker inside me, a reminder that life always finds a way to begin again, even after everything has been torn apart. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. It was his mother. Her voice was trembling, softer than I'd ever heard it. "Please come back. You were good to him. You were good to me. He made a mistake." I didn't answer right away, because for the first time, I didn't feel anger, I felt pity. Pity for her, pity for him, pity for the woman he'd thrown everything away for. Later, I would learn the truth. The nurse had slept with several men in their department. The baby wasn't his. He'd rushed into marriage, thinking it would fix his guilt. It didn't. And by the time he realized what he'd lost, I was already gone. Truly gone, not just from his life, but from the version of myself who waited for love that hurt. When I think back now, it almost feels like another life. That woman who drove through the rain with a suitcase full of broken dreams and a heart full of silence. It's strange how pain can become a memory you no longer flinch from. How the same story that once tore you apart can one day make you smile with peace. After I left, I stayed with my mother for almost a year. It wasn't easy. Some mornings I couldn't get out of bed. Other days I threw myself into work so completely that I forgot to eat. But little by little, life began to breathe again inside me. Working as a neonatologist helped me heal more than any therapist could. Every time I held a newborn, small, warm, and impossibly alive, I felt reminded that every ending gives way to a beginning. Those tiny hands, those fragile heartbeats, they were proof that life doesn't stop because something broke. It keeps going. It always finds a way. My mother used to watch me come home after long shifts, hair messy, eyes tired but calm. One night over tea, she said, "You've become yourself again." And I smiled. Because she was right. I was no longer trying to be someone's wife, someone's hope, someone's disappointment. I was just me. And that was enough. Time passed. I didn't date for a long time. I wasn't afraid of love. I was just careful with my peace. Then one day, during a medical conference in another city, I met a man who changed everything I thought I knew about love. He was a pediatric surgeon, quiet and thoughtful, with kind eyes that actually listened when I spoke. We talked for hours that evening, about work, about family, about how strange it is that people can save others' lives while struggling to fix their own. There was no rush, no games, no grand promises, just calm. The kind of calm that feels like home. He didn't ask about my past right away. When I finally told him, he didn't pity me. He just said, "Then it's his loss. And you're beginning." We started seeing each other more often, sometimes between shifts, sometimes only on weekends when work allowed. A year later, he proposed, not with fireworks or speeches, but with a quiet smile and a simple ring. I said yes, without hesitation. Our wedding was small, just family, close friends, and laughter. My mother cried the whole time, not from sadness, but from joy. And when I looked at my husband, my real partner, my peace, I knew I'd finally found what I was meant for all along. A year later, I became pregnant. It felt surreal after everything I'd been told, after all the failed tests, all the hopeless years. But there it was, a heartbeat on the screen. Our son was born healthy and strong, with his father's eyes. Then came another boy, 2 years later. And then, finally, our daughter, the gentle miracle who completed our little world. 3 children. 3 reasons to never doubt God's timing again. Sometimes I sit in the living room, watching them play, and I think about the version of me who once cried herself to sleep believing she'd never be a mother. If only she could see this now, the laughter echoing through the house, the warmth, the love that doesn't demand anything in return. She'd be proud. I am proud. And as for my ex-husband, I don't hate him anymore. In fact, I rarely think of him at all. But sometimes, stories find their way back to you through whispers and coincidence. A mutual friend once told me that he's still with that same woman. They never had children together, and the boy she gave birth to, the one that ended our marriage, turned out not to be his after all. Still, he's raising him. They live quietly, almost like strangers sharing a roof. I guess some lessons come with a lifetime sentence. When I heard that, I didn't feel revenge or satisfaction. I just felt distance, like hearing a story that belonged to someone else entirely. Because in truth, it does. My life now is filled with noise, the kind of noise that heals. Children's laughter, morning cartoons, the clatter of breakfast plates, the sound of small feet running through the hallway. My husband and I work in the same hospital now, sometimes crossing paths during shifts. He always finds time to send me a text that says, "Dinner tonight?" Even though he knows I'll say yes. We still argue sometimes, about the dishes, about bedtime routines, about the small chaos that comes with 3 kids. But even those moments feel alive, real, safe. Because love isn't about perfection. It's about peace. And for the first time, I have both. If life has taught me anything, it's this. You can lose everything, your marriage, your plans, your dreams, and still end up exactly where you're meant to be. Sometimes, walking away isn't the end of your story. It's just the chapter where you finally come home to yourself. And when I tuck my children in at night, when my husband kisses me goodnight, and the house finally falls quiet, I whisper a small prayer, not of anger or regret, but of gratitude. For the heartbreak that pushed me to grow. For the woman I became because of it. And for the life I have now, the one I built with my own 2 hands, filled with the kind of love that never asks me to shrink just to stay. Because I didn't just survive. I lived. And I finally learned that sometimes, life's greatest blessings come disguised as loss.